There are so many sources of funding that sometimes it's hard to know where to start and how to go about navigating all these different funding sources. So let's discuss the main categories systematically, and then we can give some examples in each category. So the main sources of funding are governments, non-governmental organizations or nonprofits, private firms, and individuals. So let's start with that. Let's keep it simple. Examples of government funding sources could be your national government, or it could be international or multilateral organizations or aid agencies from other governments. Examples of NGOs could include local or national NGOs or INGOs, international NGOs, or foundations at any scale. And then from the private sector, you could find investment funds like venture capital funds. You could find businesses with investment arms or corporate social responsibility funds, and banks. And then from individuals, it could span philanthropists or angel investors, friends and family, or the crowd. So we're going to go through each of these one by one and chat in a bit more detail. So starting with governments. Governments are usually sources of grant funding, although sometimes they might also have investment arms to support small businesses or to support innovation. And there's a lot of variety in government funding. You could get large grants from a specific government agency, like the Department of Energy, if you're working on renewable energy, for example. Or you could get a grant from your local or state government if your work helps develop the local economy, create jobs, or solve for areas of priority that they've identified. And recently, many governments have started innovation funds to support entrepreneurs, so you could look for startup resources there. Then there are the international, also called multilateral agencies, where different governments from around the world pool in to fund different areas, like the World Bank, UN agencies. We've already talked about some of those as sources of information when you were conducting research. And they're also sources of funding. Especially if you're working in a low or middle income country, you might qualify for aid funding or multilateral funding. And you could look at specific international aid agencies, like from specific countries, or from the different UN agencies, depending on the topic, like UNDP for development, then there's UN Environment, UNICEF for children, the World Food Program for food security, the Labor Organization, etc. So that's governments. And then there's also non-governmental organizations or NGOs. And these can also take many different shapes and forms. So you can have private foundations that were founded by families or individuals like the Ford, Rockefeller, Clinton, Dell foundations. Some of these might be familiar names to you. You could have foundations tied to businesses also, like the Google Foundation, or you can have public or community foundations that might focus on a specific location or topic. And these mostly give grants, but they could do impact investing, and I'll explain what each of these means in the future videos. Then you have the INGOs, like Oxfam, Mercy Corps, etc. So these have their specific mission, like tackling poverty, and then they have programs that they implement towards that mission, but they also fund others working on their own programs, like you potentially. So these NGOs and foundations and the government sources, they advertise their funding opportunities on their websites, newsletters, and other channels. For example, Devex.com, DEVEX, is a social enterprise that's dedicated to connecting professionals working on sustainable development, so you could look there for funding sources, and there are many others. Okay, so moving on from NGOs and foundation, the next source of funding is an investment fund. So the first example that might come to your mind is a venture capital fund or VC fund. These are for-profit investment firms that support entrepreneurs creating financial growth. So they really emphasize high-scale, high-growth, high-profit ventures. There's many different types of investment funds, and they can be either private or public, depending on who started them. So VC funds are private, but there could be public investment funds too. And either individuals or institutions can put their money in an investment fund and then share in the profit. There are even nonprofit investment funds that reinvest the profit in further innovation and impact. Sometimes corporations or businesses have their own investment funds or incubators to invest in entrepreneurs, and they might even acquire startups. Corporates and businesses might also have CSR funds, which stands for Corporate Social Responsibility, and that's usually money they give away without expecting financial return. CSR programs can also help non-financially, like you might be able to get employees of a company to work with you, to volunteer, or you could tap into a company's other resources that they have that they might be able to share with you if they're working on the same topic, like their supply chain, etc. So when approaching any source of funding, whether it's a government or multilateral agency or an NGO or a foundation or an investment fund or a corporation, make sure to look for an alignment in values. What are they hoping to achieve? Is it the same as what you're hoping to achieve? What resources do they have other than the funding that can support your goals? Mentorship is a huge resource that you could get. So feel free to shop around, interview other people that have been funded by this organization and ask what their experience was like. There could be so many pros and cons to different sources of funding, and we'll talk more about those later, but I wanted to stop and mention that here. And now we'll get into the last source of funding we'll discuss today, which are individuals. And those also fall into many categories. So high net worth individuals give large amounts of money. It could be either through philanthropy, where they don't ask for it back, or through angel investing, where they support social entrepreneurs that can give them a financial return, but they're not really in it for the financial return. They just want to make a difference. That's why they're called angels. They'll take a risk in you. And there are angel investing networks where you can find angels. And also, I find that the best way to find them is to go to conferences. Like it could be a social entrepreneurship conference or a subject-specific conference. And then people interested in creating change in that area will be there. So those are the high net worth individuals. And then there's friends and family, which most people don't think of as a source of funding, but sometimes at the proof of concept stage, entrepreneurs will reach out to their friends and family for a small or medium amount that can help them just develop a prototype or proof of concept. And again, there's pros and cons. Like some people might feel safer taking money from their friends and family. Others might feel the opposite, like they would then hate to disappoint them or lose that money. It's really important to communicate if you're going to do a friends and family fundraising round that they might never see this money again if it doesn't work. And one point I want to stop and give you a piece of advice is don't self-fund. It's better not to pay for something out of your own pockets. And that's not just because it puts financial risk on you. It's also because it's really important to find other people that believe in this idea and are willing to back it. So go through that exercise. And lastly, the crowd. Crowdfunding websites are booming. So you might be familiar with crowdfunding websites for nonprofits like GoFundMe and Just Giving. Those are used for anything, not just entrepreneurship. And then there's crowdfunding websites for either nonprofit or for-profit like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where you post a venture and people just help you get it started. And then you reward them somehow, either through updates or samples or something like that. Sometimes there are regional crowdfunding websites like Zoomal.com in the Arab countries. And these are mostly donation-based. They're usually for-profit, so they'll take a fee. They'll take a percentage of what you raise, but the crowdfunders don't get it back. However, there are some newer websites that are offering financial return for the crowdfunders. Examples of those are Republic.com, WeFunder.com, and SeedInvest.com. So crowdfunding also has its pros and cons. It's great for awareness. It's usually associated with a big social media campaign. That's how you get your message out to the crowd. But it's very time-consuming. I've actually done one myself. So you remember the case study of Sufra a couple of modules back. So we had our Kickstarter video. If you Google Lebanon refugee Kickstarter food truck, you'll find it. We made this 2-minute video. And we spent months on Twitter and other social media platforms trying to get people to donate. So know that you're getting into something really time-consuming. if you start a crowdfunding campaign and that you're not going to get to keep all the money, so be careful about what fees or percentages the crowdfunding website takes. So different sources of funding are not mutually exclusive. They can be suitable for your work at different stages. So you might start with government grants for research and development, and then get a foundation or NGO or multilateral agency to fund a pilot. And then the same funder might give you another bigger grant to help, or loan, to help expand your pilot until you become self-sustaining. Or you might start with a friends and family round to build a prototype or crowdfunding, and then find angel investors to help you launch until you have enough users to attract venture capitalists that will help you really scale. So there's many different paths depending on your endeavor and your goals. And then in the next video, we're going to talk about the financial vehicles. How do these different sources of funding support different endeavors? What are the mechanics of that? Let's find out.